Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today with Veeam and Pure Storage. So the webinar is going to be focusing on how to tackle data and application growth with Pure Storage FlashArray and Veeam Cloud Data Management. So we're pleased to be joined today by Max Brown from Pure Storage and Anastasia Ellingson from Veeam, who will both be presenting the webinar for you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Amy. Just give me 2 seconds. Just put my screen up. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining today. So briefly, I think I'll start off with a very quick introduction of the two companies. So I'm Max Brown, I work for Pure Storage, Channel Technical Manager. So if you haven't heard of Pure, we've been around since 2009. We've been shipping products since 2012. We've got about 6,500 customers globally now, about 15,000 arrays deployed. Top right in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for the last 5 years in terms of all flash storage. We have a huge global presence, and you know, there's some company milestones at the bottom in terms of the various things that we've done and released, which again, I'm not going to go through this now because you will get a recording of this afterwards. So very briefly, Pure's portfolio of products. So on the left, we have the FlashArray X, and this is our block-based storage array, which presents storage using Fiber Channel or iSCSI, and this is typically what customers would run their critical infrastructure on, you know, the kind of tier 1, tier 2 critical infrastructure, generally things like virtual machines, databases, big Unix servers, etc. And you know, we're going to talk around how Veeam kind of plugs into these various products. We also have FlashBlade, which is on the other side of storage, which is more on the unstructured side. So this is a very highly performant scale-out object and file store. So this is the kind of thing that customers would use for high-performance compute, for data analytics, for AI-type workloads, but also it's been used before for rapid recovery in terms of, you know, plugging in backup products such as Veeam and being able to use this as a very rapid recovery. We also have ObjectEngine, which specifically works with vendors such as Veeam and is designed for doing deduplicated backups and ultra-fast recovery from either something like a FlashBlade or from the cloud. And then speaking of the cloud, we have our own offerings in AWS this year, and Azure will come next year. But in terms of running an array in the cloud, but as a software virtual appliance rather than physical, and then running something like ObjectEngine for backups, but running that in the cloud as well. So that's a very brief overview of the Pure portfolio. I'll let Anastasia talk about Veeam.
Thank you, Max. So here is Anastasia Ellingson. I'm Alliance System Engineer with Veeam. A couple of words about Veeam as a company. So for those who don't know us, we are on the market already for 12 years, and we are now #1 backup solution in EMEA with more than 330,000 customers worldwide. One of the things that's interesting about Veeam, it's also that it has one of the highest Net Promoter Score in the industry, which is basically directly correlated to the satisfaction rate of our customers. So if we will be talking a little bit more about our strategy over those years, we started as a solution to protect virtual machines in the very beginning, back in 2008, with our Veeam Backup and Replication product. And with the years, we were developing together with the market, going into the direction where businesses today are going. So in 2012, some time ago now, we started to concentrate more on the data center as a whole rather than just a virtualization part. Last year and this year, we are shifting our focus from fragmentary infrastructure protection to the holistic cloud data management. That includes the multi-cloud strategy, which is today almost a given factor at enterprise infrastructures. So we will see that it translates technically into the possibility to protect physical and virtual workloads, but also workloads in the cloud, as well as leveraging object storage as a target for backups. In terms of our portfolio, Backup and replication is our flagship product, which is the most known on the market. But today we are shifting from just backup as a single solution to the availability platform, because availability is more than just backup. It also includes monitoring, analytics, capacity planning, orchestration, protection of your cloud workloads, and that's what Veeam Availability Platform is about. You have backup and replication together with monitoring in Veeam Availability Suite, and then you have also Veeam Orchestrator for advanced disaster recovery of the workloads. You have Veeam Backup for Office 365 to protect Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and OneDrive. And together it all comprises the platform. Okay, so that was a really brief overview, and now back to Max.
Yeah, so I think, and this is one of the key things that people have talked about backup for as long as I can ever remember. But, the key thing about backup is it's not just about backup, it's about restore. That's probably more important. But people want to actually use their backup data. If you've got 50 terabytes of data that now lives on a backup repository, whether that's disk or tape, if it's sitting there doing nothing and you're just waiting to do a recovery in case of someone deleting something or something being corrupted, then you've got some data that potentially you could use, but you're doing nothing with it. So people not only want rapid restore, but is there a way that I can use my backup data as a test and dev environment? How can I use it to run tests against it, to do malware detection or use analytics? So it is more about, getting more out of your backup data. And then lastly, don't forget that data protection does not always mean that you have business protection. The fact that all of your data is backed up somewhere safe doesn't mean that if you lost something, your business could actually recover from that. We've seen instances where, doing a restore from various other products can take such a long time to do that if a customer had something catastrophic happen, the amount of time it would take to do a restore could mean that they're out of business. Or the other side of it could be that they breach SLAs and are subject to penalty fines. So it is all about how do I protect my business as well as my data. So we're going to kind of cover off three kind of very simple scenarios in terms of Veeam and Pure working together. And Anastasia and myself will go into more detail. But number one is just how do we protect the primary workload? So if you're running a Pure FlashArray, you've got your SQL databases, your Oracle databases, your virtual machines. How can we protect those? How can we leverage the snapshot features of the array to integrate that with Veeam? The next part is looking at FlashBlade, so building out what we call a data hub. So how can I use a technology such as FlashBlade for ultra rapid restore, faster than anything on the market to do those fast restores? But also, how can I use that FlashBlade architecture for things other than just restore? And then last piece, we'll be looking at kind of longer term retention. How can we enable very fast, very scalable, but very cost effective backup and recovery from the cloud? So Anastasia, back to you.
Yes, so the first step is obviously related to primary workloads. And together with the Pure Storage FlashArray, Veeam allows for deep integration on the snapshot level. So what's the idea behind the integration with snapshots? For Veeam, it means that potentially you have the best level of data protection because you can combine two parallel approaches to the data protection. So the first level is creating backups, and the second level, and they are both equally important and both have advantages, is to be able to leverage FlashArray native snapshots as additional points for data restore. So the best practice for the data protection in this case would look like the combination of both approaches, where the backups are used to provide us with an additional copy of data in the worst case scenario where something happens to a FlashArray. And if we are facing another scenario, let's say just a partial data loss, a single virtual machine crash where we need to restore quickly, Veeam can orchestrate the snapshot jobs for FlashArray, and afterwards leverage those for really fast and really granular backups. So in terms of restores that Veeam will be able to provide directly from the storage snapshots of FlashArray, customers are free to choose based on the scenario, either to restore a full virtual machine, individual guest files from Windows or Linux systems, but also there is a possibility to go deeper in terms of granular application restore, and for example restore a single email or a single Active Directory user directly from Snapshot. And one of the important detail for that, you don't need to install the agents on top of your virtual machine. It just works out of the box like magic, because you can set up backup job that orchestrates the snapshot, and then you have a full visibility of the entire contents of virtual machines that are within the snapshot to restore it with Veeam. Today we already mentioned a point that one of the current requirements that we are facing is to be able to leverage backup data, because it is of little use when it's just laying there doing nothing. With Veeam, there is a possibility to actually leverage storage snapshots as well as backups in order to provide automated restore verification and much more. So technically, the workflow is quite simple. Veeam is able to just select any specific workloads that you are interested, let's say some databases, some mission critical applications, restore them within a completely isolated environment so that there is zero risk to your production environment. And you will have a possibility to do any type of advanced tests on the copy of your production data, and importantly, with the same type of performance that you are getting from your production. So in terms of test and DevOps scenario, that obviously gives you a better opportunity to test a real life performance rather than leveraging backups, which usually would be also possible, but a bit less performant. So what are the scenarios in which we would leverage the storage snapshot and backup data? So one of the scenarios is obvious, and that is recommended for 100% of the cases, advanced tests of your recoverability, which includes mounting the virtual machines, testing their boot network and application layers, seeing that everything's working fine, getting documentation on this verification. But you can go further with that. So one of the scenarios will be using your real live data for some troubleshooting within the isolated environment. Any DevOps that involves using, for example, the real contents of your databases, because that's much more interesting than just using some dummy databases for tests. Testing patches, updates, and responding to current trends and current challenges on the market. One of the use for that would be using this technology, which is called DATALARS, for GDPR compliance or for advanced security, because with DATALARS it is possible to again mount those virtual machine in isolated environment, and then, for example, in case of staged restore GDPR compliance use case, you can remove the sensitive data from those before restoring it back to production. Or for secure restore, you're able to actually use the antivirus of your choice to double check if those points are not affected by any malware. Okay, so that was briefly about the first stage.
Cool. Okay, so thanks, Anastasia. So let's talk a bit more about what we mean by a data hub. So, you know, if you look at environments today, they can be quite complex in terms of the different environments that you have, and as you scale these out. So although we've got Veeam and you can have backup appliances, we do have very many customers that would have separate storage for test and dev. Then they might have a NAS and object store for containers. They could be running data lake analytics on another set of infrastructure. So what you can end up with is an environment where literally here we could have 5 different silos of production type storage plus a separate backup appliance. So lots of different storage, lots of different silos of infrastructure, and nothing actually working as one. When in reality, the thing that we can do with Pure is quite simply to say, right, your tier 1 storage, the FlashArray, the thing that we kind of talked about previously that Veeam plugs into to do the data labs and to do the storage snapshots. But also then what we can do is use FlashBlade for a multitude of use cases. So now, because of the way FlashBlade is designed, it's a very fast, very scale out, very concurrent storage system. So then what we could do is we could present an NFS mount point to Veeam, and Veeam could back up to that, and also the recovery would be incredibly fast. We've seen up to 30 terabytes an hour, so which I think is about 10 gigabytes a second. So extremely fast recovery from that. Plus, you could have your test dev environment on FlashBlade. If you're using large data warehousing appliances, you could host that on FlashBlade. If you are running something like Splunk or for analytics or something like Apache Spark, and you've got a DAS infrastructure, you could consolidate that onto FlashBlade. So rather than having multiple different environments, on the previous slide, there was about 5 or 6 different physical environments. Now we've rationalized that down to 2. So you don't have to spend money building out a backup physical infrastructure when actually you could use what you've already got and just add more blades into a FlashBlade system. So in terms of the rapid restore from this, so again, Anastasia's already talked about how Veeam can talk to Pure and it can utilize the Pure snapshots, and it could be that you leave the snapshots on the array, but obviously the advantage of Veeam is that it's going to catalog those snapshots, index them, and allow you to do much more granular recovery. But also, if you wanted to take those snapshots and back them up to a separate place that's not on the array, then you could back them up to FlashBlade. So with this, if you're doing a restore from a FlashBlade, because of the way it scales out and the speed of it, as you can see, it's kind of, we're looking at a 42x performance based on some of our, industry standard times of restore. So you've got the ability for Veeam to do local, very rapid recoveries using snapshots that exist on the array. Or if you want to, offload this to something else that's extremely fast, then FlashBlade is a very scalable and very fast scale-out platform in order to do that. So Anastasia, I'll just defer to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about Veeam's data efficiencies and data reduction?
Yes, absolutely. Because again, Veeam, as you mentioned, integrates with the snapshot. But of course, for optimal data protection, it's a good idea to leverage FlashBlade as a target for backups. And in this case, one of the important points is how we can actually reduce our footprint in terms of the space that those backups will take. And here, Veeam actually offers both compression that, let's say in the very worst case scenario is around 2 to 1 in terms of data reduction. So at 1 terabyte at source will be around 500 gigs as a full backup, usually less, depending on how well data is compressed. Again, for the cases where we have a data that compresses and deduplicates quite well, and that will be a big number of scenarios because all those virtual machines that are deployed from the same template with the same operating system that have a nice deduplication ratio, or the data that can be compressed nicely, that will give us the result which is closer to 3 to 1 or even better than this. So in terms of FlashBlade efficiency, out of 56 terabyte unit, we'll get at least 112 terabyte backup usable space, or potentially even much better than that.
So one thing I'll talk about now is the kind of the more the longer term retention, also a product that we released within the last few months called ObjectEngine. So I'm sure everyone's heard of the phrase disk to tape, which, to be honest, you know, in today's 21st century environment, disk to tape sounds like something from the 20th century, right? Most customers want to move away from disk and backing up to tape. I know a lot of people still do it, but it's still a very old school, very painful way of doing things. So with, you know, having a dedicated disk backup appliance, you know, what we have found with disk backup appliances that came out 20 odd years ago, they were very good at solving a problem that people had, which was backup windows. This solved the problem, so customers weren't breaching their backup windows, but every time we've seen customers try and recover, they are very, very slow to recover. Then if you wanted your data off site, you'd probably have to replicate from one backup appliance to another backup appliance, which you then eventually ship onto tape, which literally just lives in a tape library, and it goes dark, and it's very difficult to get that data back in any kind of decent time frame. So given that we are in the 21st century, you know, then it makes sense that, you know, let's ditch disk to tape, flash to cloud. You know, this makes a lot more sense. So now what we can do is you can have your primary array, which hopefully is a pure flash array, but doesn't necessarily need to be, right? Because obviously Veeam works with all types of storage. But then what we can have is an on-premise deduplicating flash store. So we can have deduplicated data via ObjectEngine. So this is where ObjectEngine, the Pure product, is doing the deduplication. So we don't need Veeam to do it at this point. So we'd be deduplicating and storing it on FlashBlade for very, very rapid restore. But because that data is deduplicated, it can then also be sent to the cloud, which then means you're going to get better economies of scale in terms of storing less data in the cloud and having more bandwidth. So just to drill a little bit deeper into that, the way this would work is that Veeam backs up to ObjectEngine. ObjectEngine, which is basically on this screen, it's the two kind of boxes on the top. ObjectEngine would take that data, deduplicate it, compress it, and then send it to one or two destinations, one of which could be FlashBlade for your on-site rapid restore. And as you can see in the box at the bottom, we're talking about speeds of 25 terabytes an hour and about 15 terabytes an hour restore, which, you know, is an order of magnitude faster than pretty much anything else that's out there on the market today. And just those ObjectEngine nodes themselves could handle about 15 petabytes of front-end capacity. But also we could be deduplicate, you know, that deduplicated data could also be sent to today AWS S3 and then Azure towards the back end of this year. And in terms of the data reduction rates that we've seen with ObjectEngine, so ObjectEngine was designed, it was from an acquisition we did of a company called StorageUse, but ObjectEngine was designed to enable backups, you know, very cost-effective backups to the cloud and backups in the cloud. So the kind of data reduction we've seen with ObjectEngine has been anything from 20 to 30 to 1 data reduction. So this means that you're massively reducing your AWS storage bill. It also means you're reducing your network bandwidth requirement to send data to AWS. It means that when you do a restore, your restore times will be much quicker. So instead of pulling back 1 terabyte's worth of data, you might only be pulling back 30 gigabytes because of the compression, the data reduction ratios that we're getting. Plus, don't forget egress costs from the cloud. Again, that would be massively reduced. So instead of paying to egress a terabyte, it would be egress in about 30 or 40 gigabytes. So the way that ObjectEngine looks in the middle box, it's all around S3. So, and I'll let Anastasia talk a little bit more about this, but basically Veeam talks to S3 interface on ObjectEngine. ObjectEngine receives that data, it then looks up that data, it says, have I already got these blocks of data? If I have, I don't need to do anything. If it's new blocks of data, then we can compress it. And then that deduplicated data would be then sent to either a FlashBlade or Amazon S3 or a combination of both. So you can use FlashBlade as your local on-premise cache, and then Amazon S3 is, you know, basically all of your backups for life. So Anastasia, I'll defer to you to let you talk a little bit around how this really works in terms of kind of your different types of performance tiers and capacity tiers.
Yes, that's something that was introduced with update 4 of Veeam. Basically, in the past, Veeam always relied on disk-based storage. So object storage integration, that is something that is now part of scale-out backup repository. And the idea is that with the version 9.5 update 4, you are able to have a policy where you store your backups for short term in so-called performance tier. That's our classical storage. So it, in this case, FlashBlade through NFS protocol. And afterwards, you can set up within the Veeam interface after which number of days you want to offload it, where it afterwards goes to ObjectEngine, and that's obviously already S3 standard. In terms of our implementation of S3 support, it is important also to note that Veeam keeps the indexes locally also, which allows us to retrieve the data very efficiently. Again, of course, combined with a hardware performance that is backed up by FlashBlade for very fast restores. And Veeam also allows to do not only full virtual machine restores, but you can also restore granularly, even from the data that is already sent on S3 target. And the typical scenario in this case would be that with Veeam, you protect your primary infrastructure. So FlashArray, for example, that runs VMware or Hyper-V workloads. Afterwards, you send the backup data to FlashBlade. And after a certain amount of time that you selected, could be 2 weeks, 1 month, depending on policies, or more or less, and then you can actually move it further tier the older data to capacity tier, so on through ObjectEngine. Afterwards, if you need to do the restores will be still very granular and fast, even from those older sets of data.
Cool, thank you for that, Anastasia. So just to try and paint a picture of kind of what this might look like in an environment. So let's say we have FlashArray, obviously running your production applications, and then Veeam is obviously your backup vendor of choice. And then we have kind of this option of Veeam could be backing up to ObjectEngine locally. So this would provide you with, extremely high levels of deduplication and data reduction. And ObjectEngine in this instance, as you can see, is attached to FlashBlade. So this would be giving you your very, very rapid restore, your kind of 15 terabytes an hour rapid restore. But also ObjectEngine not only can store data locally as kind of a local cache for rapid restore, but also would be sending that to AWS S3. So now if I'm getting 20 or 30 to 1 data reduction, I'm sending 20 or 30 times less data to Amazon, which means your S3 bill is reduced. It means your network bandwidth requirement is reduced. It means your restore times will be much quicker from the cloud. And we've seen over 1 terabyte an hour restore from the cloud itself. And also your egress charges will be lower. But then if you are looking at running backup software in the cloud as well, or maybe you want to reuse your data in the cloud itself. So if you have your backup software such as Veeam running in AWS, you can then actually have ObjectEngine running as a software appliance in the cloud as well. So we're kind of recreating what we've got on premise, but having it in the cloud. So now what we can do is ObjectEngine in the cloud can look at that S3 bucket, and it can look at our own ObjectEngine internal indexes and know what data is there, and then present that to Veeam. So then you could be doing something like where you're backing up from site A into AWS, but then using Veeam and ObjectEngine in the cloud, you could actually reuse that data in the cloud. So instead of having the cloud just as a repository to back up to, you can actually use it for reuse. You can use it for test and dev. You actually get value out of your production data that's being backed up to the cloud. And similarly, you could have other sites that are doing the same thing, that are having on-premise rapid restores, but also backing up to the cloud as well, and then reusing that data in the cloud. Anastasia, I'll hand back to you for this.
Yes, so with Veeam, it's extremely easy. Also, we made sure that it's very easy to reuse your data in the cloud for testing or disaster recovery purposes. And this is ensured by the principle of cloud mobility. So what's cloud mobility? In the end, that's very simple. That basically self-descriptive. That allows you to take any workload that has been backed up with Veeam. So be it a virtual machine or even physical servers or even laptop images. And afterwards, with a couple of clicks for the interface, you can directly recover it either to Amazon as an EC2 instance or to Azure Stack. And what's important is that as a user, you don't have to worry about any technical details of the conversion. Doesn't matter what type of operating system you have in the beginning. Veeam will take care of converting the images in the way that in the end you just receive an identical image but running for you in the cloud without any additional hassle. So again, that's possible to do from backups that are residing on performance or on capacity tier.
Cool. So I think just to finish up and wrap up some of the key main points, and then we'll see if there are any questions come in. So just kind of going through what we've talked about. So the FlashArray snapshot integration. I mean, this is a really cool feature because obviously, the Pure array does snapshots on its own, but they're just a timestamp, so you don't actually know what's in there. And if you want to restore from that snapshot, it's kind of like a whole restore and a whole clone you have to make. Whereas once Veeam's tied into this, Veeam can orchestrate the snapshots. It will know what's in those snapshots. It can catalog it, index it, and then it can do more granular recovery. We talked about FlashBlade, which is our very fast, all flash-based scale-out NFS and object-based system, an S3-based system. So with that, you can use the Veeam DATALARS to do instant VM recovery. And again, it would be exceedingly fast recovery times from that. If you want to do cost-effective offsite DR, again, Veeam has the tools to provide the backup replication and the archival piece as well. And then, we did mention ObjectEngine, which kind of has another slant on that. The Veeam Explorers then have much greater application integration to do the granular recoveries of specific items, whether it's individual files or users or emails, much greater levels of granularity than what you'll get natively just from an array on itself. The backup copy jobs. So again, a lot of people want to replicate their backups or have more than one copy because again, this is all about protecting your data, but also protecting your business. So having more than one copy of backups is a very sensible thing to do. And you could, again, extend that to FlashBlade for the rapid recovery. I kind of mentioned DataLarS earlier, but this is a really cool innovation that Veeam have been pioneering for a number of years. And, this is all about putting your backup data to use. Don't just let it sit there and consume space and do nothing. Use it and get value from it. And then with ObjectEngine, the new product from Pure, this is going to enable long-term retention to the cloud and make the cloud a very cost-effective backup target, but also very cost-effective for restores and very fast for restores as well. So, Amy, do you know if we have any questions that have appeared in any chat boxes so far?
I will have a quick look. So everyone, if you didn't hear at the beginning, if you do have any questions, there is a questions box just on the control panel on the right-hand side. If you type them in there, I can read those out for Max and Anastasia. So nothing yet, so we'll just wait a couple of minutes, see if any come through.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple of questions have come in. It says, what are the average bandwidths that are being used to enable cloud as an efficient backup target?
To be honest, I mean, this is one of those age-old questions. Unfortunately, the answer to that is it depends. So it does depend on how much data you would be sending to the cloud. And if you wanted to try and calculate that today, you could look at your traditional current backups and work out what your incremental backups are. So, if you did a full backup on a Monday, that will be all of the data. Then on a Tuesday, if you did an incremental backup, your backup tool should be able to tell you how much backup, how much data you actually backed up incrementally, which then gives you an idea of the bandwidth you'd need to send to Amazon. But of course, then if you factor in something like ObjectEngine, and we've got a load of calculators and TCO tools, which will be able to come up with a decent approximation of how much that data could potentially be reduced by. And from that, we could then come up with something. But we've had use cases where customers have reduced their original network bandwidth by a factor of 10 because we did get 30-to-1 data reduction. So one customer, I can't remember who it was, but specifically they had 4 10-gig pipes and they reduced it down to 4 1-gig pipes because of the data reduction being that good. So there's a lot of benefits that can be done. But in terms of how big does your bandwidth need to be, it does honestly depend on how much data is going to be sent.
Thank you, Max. And there's another question here for Anastasia. With regards to Azure Site Recovery, how does Veeam integrate it?
So that's a good question. There is no direct integration. Basically, we provide an alternative to site recovery in this sense, because with Veeam, what is currently possible in the version 9.5 update 4 is to recover individual virtual machines, or again, could be physical machines, directly to Azure as instances. So that's just a slightly different use case.
Okay, thanks, Anastasia. A question here said, is the ObjectEngine a piece of software or hardware?
It's actually, it was originally software from the company that we acquired, but the way that the way that Pure have released it, it is a physical piece of hardware. So it basically looks like a 4-node cluster on site. So it is a physical piece of hardware that lives on premise, that your backup, that Veeam would talk to. So they talk to it as an S3 target. So yes, it is a physical appliance on premise that then that physical appliance would dedupe and compress the data and then send that reduced data to either FlashBlade or to AWS. Now, later on this year, we will have the ability to run ObjectEngine on an EC2 instance in AWS. So, even if a customer is 100% cloud, then Pure will be able to service all of that using just the software-based approach. So the answer is yes and yes. It's a hardware-based solution for on-premise, but if you're doing backups of cloud data and you're backing up in the cloud itself, then that can run on an EC2 instance as software.
Brilliant, thanks, Max. And one more question here. What is the estimated cost of the 56 terabyte blade?
Very cost effective, I would say. At this stage, I couldn't come up with a price, to be honest. I don't know the prices off the top of my head, but if you've got any interest in this, just feel free to drop bytes a line afterwards and we can work on some indicative pricing and scenarios for you.
Yeah, Andy, we can get back to you on that one. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like that's all the questions that we have today. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your days to join the webinar today. I hope you found it really valuable. And thank you also, Max and Anastasia, for presenting today. As mentioned at the beginning, I'll send you all a link to the recording this afternoon. And if you would like any further information, please do complete the feedback form, as we really appreciate that. Okay, so thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.